This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
With National Agriculture Day just around the corner, how is the industry faring after a year of challenges? Hello, folks, and welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. Thanks for taking the time to join us. I like to think we celebrate agriculture every week here on this program, but National Ag Day is a time when the focus around the country turns to agriculture. And Max wanted to see how things are shaping up from the view of the largest farm organization in the country.
Right around Agriculture Day each year, Mike, we catch up with farmers and ranchers in Washington, D.C., where many of them go to meet with their lawmakers this time of year. It's not happening this year. We caught up with the president of the American Farm Bureau in the kitchen of his farm home in Georgia. But Zippy Duvall assured us the contacts are still being made with the lawmakers and with their staff members on the matters that really matter. And he said after all of the food concerns in the pandemic last year, there is some attention being paid to agriculture. I asked Zippy if that's fresh enough in the minds of the lawmakers that they really will listen to farmer concerns.
I think it's going to have a huge positive effect, Max, because I think that, I was just on a hearing in front of the Ag House Committee last week talking about hunger. They understand the hunger that's around our country and the richest country in the world and the breadbasket of the world, and we still have some of our friends and neighbors that are hungry. We've always had a little bit of that, but now because of the pandemic, there's a lot of it. And we've seen lines at food banks, and that we don't want to see that in America. So what brought that about? The pandemic brought it about, a little interruption in the food chain, but it also makes them turn their attention to who's producing food and making sure that that food is there and us solve the problems that we've seen in the food chain, getting it to the people.
You mentioned the House Ag Committee. How problematic is it for farm interest that we've seen such a shift in the makeup of these key committees that have been so powerful, and a shift away from rural areas where the producers, the folks of production agriculture, the farmers and ranchers have more of a direct connection with these lawmakers? How difficult will it be to get legislation through there now?
No, I think it's such a focus on feeding people and keeping agriculture strong to protect our country. I think that we're in a positive place to get some positive things done. It really comes down to whether or not are they willing to work bipartisanly. Can they set their party aside and really work what's right for the American people, rural America, and our food system? And we're the very first link in that food system, so we're the most important link in that food system. But I think with the attention that Chairman Scott has given hunger, climate discussions, talking about what's coming up in the next farm bill, I'm hoping we're going to have more bipartisan work there to be able to find some real solutions to some problems that are facing us.
That bipartisanship has been hard to find in recent months, isn't it?
Well, it has been in recent years, really. But having said that, Max, if we look back over history, agriculture and agriculture committee is the first place that you can find bipartisanship work. I mean, really and truly, normally at the end of the day, they try to find some way to make sure that people get fed and the food is available and taking care of our farmers so that we can produce that food. So if they can't do it in the House Ag Committee, they're surely not going to do it in the other committees.
On some of these matters that really matter, are you trying to get the members ginned up here a little bit to get involved in the lobbying effort to try to reach out to their representatives and their senators to get some support for these things that really matter?
All the time. In a national organization, the biggest challenge we have is to keep our members engaged. Our farmers are very busy, and we're really coming up on a planting season. They'll get even busier. But we've had some alerts going out to our members, asking them to call in about taxes and other issues, and we've had really good response. So our farmers are responding, and they know that they got to have their voice heard, and we got to do it virtually and through social media and any means that we can use to make sure that the Americans around the country understand how important we are, what we need to keep American agriculture in good shape, and to make sure that they press their Congress and senators to support us.
Zippy, when you look over the hierarchy of the things that really matter to Farm Bureau members, those key issues, when you get past the state tax and when you get past the Farm Bill, what are some of the other things? Waters of the United States, that could rear its ugly head. What are some of the things that really are front and center for you?
Well, the front and center one for me, and it always has been and has been for decades here at American Farm Bureau, is the challenge that we have in finding the labor we need. It's the biggest limiting factor, and I've said that over and over again. It's the biggest limiting factor that American agriculture has. We do not have enough labor. Americans have decided they don't want to do that work, and the H-2A program does not fit all of agriculture, and it doesn't really work in itself. It's very cumbersome, very expensive, and most small and medium farmers can't participate in it.
We enjoyed the visit with the president of the Farm Bureau, Zippy Duvall. There's more to that interview. You can see it on our This Week in Agribusiness Facebook page this weekend. Mike?
Thank you, Max, and thank you, Zippy, for sharing your insight here on This Week in Agribusiness. But it's time to talk markets. We continue to see volatility, and to help us make sense of what's going on, we're joined this week by Carl Setzer, the Senior Commodity Risk Analyst at Agrivisor. And Carl, I want to start off right off the bat talking about exports. We continue to get export news, and yet when we look at export sales, at least on the soybean side, they're a little bit slower than the trade would like, it would seem. What are your thoughts here on soybean exports?
Yeah, you're 100% correct there, Mike. We have backed off on our soybean sales, and the thing is right away when we started backing off a little bit, if we remember, early winter, late fall, we were selling and shipping out, 50, 60 million bushels of soybeans a week, and everybody is saying, we have to slow this down. We have to slow this down. Well, then we slow it down, and everybody starts to panic that we're slowing down. The pendulum has swung. The past week here, we sold 7 million bushels of soybeans. Good share of them went to China. That is a considerable decline from what we have seen. But we got to look at the big picture, Mike, and realize that our export sales for the remainder of the marketing year only need to total not even 1 million bushel per week to meet the current yearly USDA projection. So when you put it into that context, in the past week, basically we sold, almost 2 months worth of soybean sales. So we've slowed down, but we haven't came to a halt, and we're not seeing cancellations. And that's the big one. That's what we worried about when we started the South American harvest, that we would see our soybean sales washed out of. That's not taking place. And to me, that's a bigger boost for the market right now than the actual volume we're selling.
Now, that's a really interesting point. I was talking to a friend of mine down there in Mato Grosso, Brazil, and he said the soybean harvest is just a little bit over 80% complete. So, we should have those South American supplies making their way to the ports here shortly. Carl, are you expecting bean cancellations still to come?
No, I'm not. And we'll probably see some. We see some every year. When we get to the end of the marketing year, we see some flipped over. The thing I expect this year, and let me back up a second. The slow start to the South American harvest and their export program has greatly reduced the chances of seeing cancellations in the United States. That's been a big benefit for us. The quality concerns with the South American soybeans, high in moisture, a little bit, worrisome there. And we don't know how them soybeans are going to store in Brazil until they can get to the port. And getting them to the port is a problem. I don't think we see big cancellations. I'm a little skeptic over the trade is promoting that at the end of the marketing year for Brazil, and I'm talking July and August, we would see more buying for the United States. I don't think we see that happen. I think our sales are strung out as far as shipments go, but big cancellations, no, I'm not seeing that take place this year.
Not too worried to see them come down the pipe. Carl, it's interesting. You mentioned the damage. My same friend down in Brazil mentioned that about 10% of the beans coming out of the field are damaged, and storage is going to be a real concern due to all the moisture down there. And
yeah, and I think that's pushing a lot of their soybeans into the market as fast as we can. We're already seeing reports that for March, they're expected to see record. Ports are expected to see record activity in March, record activity in May. They want to get them soybeans out as fast as they can in these first 2-3 months of the marketing year, so they don't have to worry about that storage later on.
That's right. We'll be back to talk more markets with Carl Setzer right after this. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by the Soybean Checkoff. Tips, videos, how-tos, and more. If it has to do with ag tech, you'll find it in the Tech Tool Shed, your unbiased one-stop resource. We're talking markets with Carl Setzer from Agrivisor. And Carl, we spent a lot of time talking soybeans and their export potential, but this has been another week of big news when we're looking at corn exports. We saw China step in, make some fairly good-sized purchases once again.
Yeah, China did. They stepped in 3 big flash sales this week, and we got to look at them, and we're going to take them with a grain of salt because trade did. China needs corn. Their corn crop down. Their supplies have dwindled. But we got to remember, we had that trade summit meeting between the United States and China, of all places, in Alaska, that took place on Thursday. And, ahead of that, to see China come in and make some good faith purchases, we call them, not too surprising. Trying to make everybody feel a little bit more cozy and that they really intend to make purchases long-term from the United States. That eased up on the pressure on whether or not China would be in. The big question is would they have made them purchases anyway? And my thing is even more, let's look forward to this week, next week, down the road, see if China keeps buying. Their ag minister has indicated they want to cut back on corn and feed rations, use more alternative grains, looking at wheat, barley, DDGs. When we start seeing that, the long-term corn consumption in China, a little bit questionable. But a sale's a sale. As long as we can keep them going, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, and you mentioned looking at alternative feedstuffs. Carl, it's not like there's a discount feed out there. Wheat prices have certainly been climbing right in concert with corn and soybeans. And in fact, given the recent rainfall across a lot of the southern plains, well, rain and snowfall for our viewers down in that part of the world, they've seen it all. It looks like the U.S. winter wheat crop might be sitting in an okay position. Is there some risk ahead here in wheat pricing?
Yeah, I really think there is, Mike. And I'll tell you, looking long term, wheat has really taken off. The United States, we've seen the pressure off. The rains, now we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in the overall weather outlook of the market, maybe a softening of the La Nina. There's talk that, some long-term forecasters claim by the end of June that event will be wrapped up and be gone. If that takes place, that's going to be a great benefit to the wheat. And you can't just look at the United States. Canadian wheat crop, their potential looks pretty good. Black Sea wheat has improved. And Australia put out a statement here that they feel that their wheat crop is going to be record sized again next year. We have wheat in the global market. It's eased up the demand on the U.S. crop, but we're still seeing high consumption, and this whole acreage shifting this year, any wheat that does look a little questionable, don't be surprised that doesn't get tore up and maybe go to corn or soybeans, especially in areas where we can get to an export market.
Well, that's the thing. That export market is where the bid is. Carl, as you look ahead to this next week, do we think market sentiment's going to be moving to the upside here in grains?
I tell you, I think the first 3 days we're going to see a little bit of positioning back and forth. We're going to see them reports come out, and I think we trade them for a little bit, and it's right back to weather, South America, and positioning for the next WASDE report.
All right, Carl Setzer from Agrivisor, thanks so much for spending a little time with us.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. Combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability.
Chad Colby is going to teach us a little bit about technology, and ordinarily it's a new out-of-the-box product that Chad brings us. But farmers are oftentimes able to take somewhat older technology and attach new pieces to it and wind up with a whole new tool on their operation.
Many producers across the Midwest have spent a lot of time in the shop lately. This past week, I caught up with our friend Matt Foes. as I knew Matt had added a new planter to his fleet, and I was anxious to learn more about it.
Yes, Chad, I added a second planter to the fleet this year, primarily and solely focused on soybeans. Over the past several years, when I've had 15-inch or narrow row soybeans, I've consistently seen a little advantage over 30-inch rows, and rather than switch planters back and forth or double back, I added a second planter solely dedicated to 15-inch row soybeans. So with that, in February, I made this decision, went out and purchased it, knew I was going to have to spend some time on it, so I went through, rebuilt it, new disc openers, scrapers, gauge wheels, the bearings in the closing wheel system so that I no longer have to worry about bushings wearing over the course of time. But at the end of the day, I have it set up the way I want it, with the addition of a row cleaner to come out front. I'll have it the way I want it to set up for soybeans on this farm.
I had noticed Matt's corn planter was parked outside, and I was curious to know if he was going to make any changes to it. I knew he'd spent a lot of time on it last summer, but knowing Matt, I'm sure it needed a few tweaks before it was ready to go.
Yeah, so the corn planter is an ever-changing thing around here. I did rebuild it last summer. As you can see in the background, the shop isn't real big, so putting a 24-row corn planter in here doesn't work. The biggest changes year over year is in the past I'd had two separate fertilizer systems, one for in-furrow and one for the side band out the sides for higher volume, 32%, etc. The in-furrow is no longer part of the program. Basically, at the end of the day, it wasn't creating enough ROI in my conditions, in my tillage scheme, to pay for itself. So I've simplified the planter, just focusing on the side band and making it plant corn that much more efficiently over the course of the acre.
One thing's for certain, it's nice to see you can take equipment like Matt's that's 6-7 years old and add a lot of great new technology to help you move the needle on your farm. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad, for that update. And if you want to see more new paint, don't go away. Later on in the program, we'll take a look at the Kilbro 1135 grain cart from the Farm Progress virtual experience. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Each week, it seems that we start to see the ag industry awaken from its COVID-inspired slumber, and we bring more events back onto the calendar in an in-person way. It wasn't that long ago, another major event declared they will be back in person, and it's the World Pork Expo. To talk to me about it a little bit, we have Jen Sorensen, the newly elected president of the National Pork Producers Council. And Jen, how excited are you to have World Pork Expo coming back?
Well, we're pretty excited. After 2 years of not hosting a World Pork Expo, we're very glad to have announced late last week that we'll be hosting the trade show again this year, June 9th through 11th at the Des Moines, Iowa State Fairgrounds. So really eager to get back into the pork industry, really embrace the networking, the exhibitors, the new products, the innovation, and just the fellowship that our industry enjoys.
That's the truth. These get-togethers are a way for folks from around the country and indeed around the world at the World Pork Expo to get together. And Jen, that brings me to ask, 2019 was canceled as African swine fever spread around the globe and specifically in China. 2020 was canceled due to COVID. And here in 2021, COVID is retreating to the rearview mirror, knock on woods, but African swine fever, PEDV, PRRS, all of these diseases in the swine industry still exist. How does NPPC plan to prepare biosecurity for an event like this?
You're absolutely right. Well, we're taking every precaution that we can. We've learned a lot about how diseases spread, not only swine diseases, but also human diseases as well. And the first big change that we made was we dropped the live pig show. So there'll be no live pigs at the event. That was moved to another state, another location at another time. And so that was the biggest risk that we had at the show, was having live pigs there. We also do precautions like boot washes and different biosecurity practices, really to make sure that we're not putting anyone at risk of a foreign animal disease or any disease that could be passed along by pork producers. And I think the other thing with COVID, we're learning a lot more every day. We continue to make progress on vaccine and different methods of reducing the spread of COVID. We'll be taking those precautions. I know, for instance, we'll be taking our approach with our hospitality tent a lot differently. We'll be serving food in boxes versus buffet lines. And all of those things are under considerations, and we'll be making those modifications.
Jen, when we think about the last 2 years in the pork industry, it has certainly been a roller coaster ride, from the market distortions put into effect by African swine fever, and then, of course, the production impacts that were caused as coronavirus slowed down processing. For folks that they want to get back out, they want to get connected again to the industry, what's the value of coming to World Pork Expo after 2 years of not existing?
Well, I know I couldn't be more excited about the World Pork Expo announcement. Farmers attend because of the opportunity to network, the opportunity to see and understand those new innovative practices and new products coming to the industry. You know, we'll have over 400 exhibitors. There's always educational opportunities, always networking opportunities, and always just embracing and enjoying that fellowship that our industry has.
Jen, let's talk a little bit about where and when World Pork Expo 2021 is going to be held.
June 9th through 11th in Iowa, in Des Moines at the Iowa State Fairgrounds. So back where it's been for years and years. So proud to be hosting the event this year, and we're eager and hopeful for great attendance.
Absolutely. But of course, NPPC is busy year-round, not just at World Pork Expo time. I know before we get to June, you've got some other events coming up. Can you tell us what pork producers are working on?
So we're organizing and planning our spring LAC. This is an annual event. We do one in the spring and in the fall where we connect with members of Congress on issues that are important to pork producers. This year we'll be talking about labor and labor reform. We see dramatic shortages of laborers on our farms and in our packing plants, and it's a solution that we hope to get addressed here under the Biden administration. We'll also be advocating for COVID vaccines throughout our industry. We're essential workers, and the vaccine is essential. And finally, we wouldn't be pork producers if we weren't talking about trade and talking about growing our export markets, increasing market access, in particular in countries like Vietnam and the Philippines. We see some opportunities there.
There certainly are some things to look forward to, but the legislative world certainly impacts pork producers, and so it's so great to hear producers taking the forefront or leading the charge to make these changes happen in Washington and at state capitals. Of course, you're active all across the country.
Absolutely. Pork producers have always recognized the value of being at the table, especially with issues that are important to us, like trade, like domestic policy, like labor. And so we couldn't be more excited to get at the table and talk to our members of Congress about things that are important to our industry.
Absolutely. It is an industry that feeds a lot of people and keeps a lot of people employed. Jen Sorensen, president of the National Pork Producers Council, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. Real quick before we let you go, dates and times for the in-person World Pork Expo?
June 9th through 11th at the Des Moines, Iowa State Fairgrounds.
Fantastic. Jen, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. We look forward to getting together a little bit later on this year. Coming up, we'll take another trip to the Farm Progress virtual experience. This week, we're looking at the Kilbro 1135 Corner Auger Grain Cart.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Over the past 6 months, this grain price rally has put a little more cash in the pockets of grain farmers, and those farmers are looking for things to do with that money. Max talked with Mark Stock of Big Iron Auctions about the very strong demand for rural land, and he wondered, will prices continue to climb?
I definitely think it's going to continue. Of course, if you get to the bigger cities, more and more of the good farmland's taken out of production and turned into housing or commercial development. But what we're also seeing is a new added commodity in the land market, which is called carbon credits. And a lot of folks are looking into what that's going to add to value for their land. So we've got investors looking into purchasing land. We've got farmers who want to expand their operation looking to purchase land. And we're seeing this historic low long-term fixed interest rates, Max, that are driving that market. And of course, you know, $13 soybeans and $4.50 corn isn't hurting anything.
If we look at that carbon market, now there's much that we don't know yet. We don't know how all of this is going to finally play out in terms of private and government involvement. But are there some things that the landowner should be keeping in mind as he or she prepares perhaps for marketing that land on down the road?
Well, you said a mouthful, and we really don't know exactly how it's going to be worked into the system, because if the government gets involved and they determine whether you're going to give somebody more credit for taking a conventional farm and turning it into a no-till operation, because a no-till operation apparently has more carbon in the soils than a conventional deal is. You know, there's a lot of moving parts right now when carbon credits come on board, but we do know that several states are mandating that businesses and industry all be carbon neutral in just a couple of years. And when that happens, if they need that additional carbon credit somewhere, they're going to be reaching out to all the ag land producers and ag land owners to see if they can strike a deal, so to speak, to take advantage of some of those credits.
If someone is involved in a land transaction right now, Mark, or they anticipate it in the weeks ahead, should they be looking at putting in some kind of a clause in there relative to that carbon market and what could be transpiring? In other words, are there rights, for example, mineral rights we want to retain sometimes? Is there something similar in the carbon market?
Well, we've heard people talk about it. We haven't seen it as of yet, but I'm sure as we get closer to the mandated years, we're going to see a lot more legalese get put into place. We're going to see that drafted into the lease agreements too, because if you got a tenant that is producing the cover crops that are necessary to create more carbon, some of that carbon credit then needs to get passed on back to that tenant and to the landowner in some sort of a shared capacity. So we're going to see a lot of things, Max, shake loose here over the next coming years. And that is why land is all of a sudden becoming high on the deck of cards, so to speak, in terms of the conversation. Another thing is there just isn't a lot of land being sold right now too. So the scarcity of that and the amount of people that are looking to buy land is putting a good 10 to 15% increase in most of the land sold just in the last 4 months.
Max also talked with Mark about the equipment market. You can see more from that conversation by visiting our Facebook page for This Week in Agribusiness.
Now, agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier brings us his farm weather forecast for the nation for the week ahead. It's presented by Pivot BioProven, the nitrogen-producing microbes that stay put, whether or not.
Well, land prices certainly are exciting, and weather has been exciting.
Wow.
Yes, Greg Solier, what are we looking at in the week ahead?
I shouldn't really laugh about it. I mean, if you've been stuck in either the blizzard from a couple of weeks ago in Colorado or the severe stuff in the deep south and southeastern United States, but in between, you wanted moisture, didn't quite qualify what kind, but we certainly have seen a lot of that. Still some dryness and drought issues in the Pacific Northwest. Nothing real impressive about the maps and charts out here this week. A couple of fast-moving disturbances, primarily banked up along the Cascades and westward, the more significant moisture, but there's some seasonal cold across the Intermountain West, a little nip in the air and a touch of snow and rain across parts of the northern and central high plains with one weather system ashore. Most of the action has been playing out in the southwestern states and points out of the east. We do build up upper level high pressure over the Pacific Northwest. Seasonal coolness, quiet weather pattern, more moisture would be appreciated. We'll see what happens come runoff season, and then maybe a little dash of it through northern California in the Pacific Northwest with seasonal cold for the Canadian Prairie, a little nip in the air down through Nebraska. Otherwise, pretty quiet weather picture, all things considered, for the northwestern part of the country. One final system, you've had 2 or 3 of these things come on through California, the southwestern states, nibbling at the drought. Ongoing, plenty of issues. Snow melt issues, I think, will come into play, the lack thereof here. And at least it's cool weather to contend with, not early season heat across the valleys of California. But something gets kicked out of the southwestern part of the country. Rain and snow to the northern and central high plains areas farther east in the warm air. Probably severe weather back into quiet high pressure and mild environments for the valleys of California, desert southwest. A few sprinkles and snowflakes still lingering in through the high country of the central plains late portion of the week.
Greg, I know a lot of growers throughout the Corn Belt have been keeping an eye on the drought monitor, watching for moisture, and it seems as though that's starting to change. Rain and snow are both coming down.
That's right, and significant improvements, particularly in areas of the central Corn Belt, parts of Kansas on southward. It's really this corridor here where high pressure early in the week is welcome news, with those streams and rivers at or better than bank full, and of course little if any significant opportunity for field work. Now later in the week, here we go again, systems coming out of the southwestern part of the country, up across parts of the mid-Mississippi Valley, points to the north and east, snow potential here, upper Midwest, back into the Dakotas, rain across areas of the Ohio Valley and central and eastern Corn Belt. Wet there again this week, the vanguard of a wet ongoing spring, probably planting season as well. Slow moving low coming out of Texas, Gulf moisture, summertime heat, a couple snowflakes up through Kansas and in through New Mexico, but it's showers and thunderstorms, heavy and severe eastern Texas, Bayou country, points on to the east. That will be the story of the end part of the week. Little change with ongoing ramped up severe weather in that part of the country.
Now, does that severe weather threat, is that going to extend all the way to the East Coast?
It will, at least in the mid-Atlantic region, like last week. These systems have a path and a mind of their own. We're quiet early in the week. High pressure across the Corn Belt, including some of those wet areas. Later in the week, the high shifts north and northeastward. Temperatures moderate, still cold upper Midwest. Here's the next low, and wide and expansive the moisture shield with rain over the eastern and southern Corn Belt. Snow potential through the upper Midwest. Ultimately, some of that moisture into the northeastern part of the country. Here's this low in the southwest to northeast jet stream pattern. Boy, multi-track and long duration severe weather events last week. Have every reason to believe that's going to happen this week into the Delta early to midweek, late part of the week into the southeastern states and parts of the Carolinas as well.
Now, Greg Soye is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country. Presented by Pivot Bio Proven. Visit pivotbio.com to find a representative near you.
Continuing our weather conversation, Greg, your last maps showed a lot of different kinds of precipitation coming down this next week. Can you give us a little more detail?
Hydrometeors, by the way, rain, snow, ice, sleet. That's what we call it in the weather business.
I always learn something,
If you're inclined to go to weather school, I wouldn't quite recommend it these days, but that's a different story for a different time. And we're happy what we're doing here weather-wise. We have, unfortunately, not a very happy setup in this part of the country. We had a little bit of early season field work, shut down, too much severe weather. It's back into play this week. Flooding issues building over the south and southwestern Corn Belt, some moisture for the northeast, and some for the Pacific Northwest. Otherwise, a little change in the pattern expected for this week.
Now, the week after, we're gearing up for the Easter celebration. Greg, how are things looking?
Yeah, maybe the warmer gear along with your Easter bonnet perhaps is what is in order, and we've got a pretty good dip in the jet. There's usual warmth and heat down here. You tap into this energy supply and you come up with this particular scenario. Systems drop in the Pacific Northwest, right in California. Tap into that Gulf moisture and pick your precip and your hydrometer. It will come on down over the plains and Corn Belt, including, and again, we've talked about this weeks gone by, about increasing severe weather potential here and a northward build here as we get deeper on into the springtime season.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that second week of April. Greg, what are you expecting?
Yeah, it looks like temperatures are pretty much, moderating some. There's still no big warm up. There's still no extended dry time either. This puddle of cold air likely to stay here for the foreseeable future. Warm in the west, the southern plains up to about the Ohio, but you still come up with this scenario. This is good news in the Pacific Northwest. We have ended and will end the rainy season and through Southern California, disappointing again, but no shortage of showers and thunderstorms, eastern and southern Corn Belt, and late season snows again for the upper Midwest right through at least the mid-stretch of April time.
Well, Greg, let's take a look. That third week of April, growers are going to be wanting to get into the field. Is there a chance?
Well, winter wheat fields will have maybe some nice green up going on. There may be too much water in some areas. We do flatten the jet west to east, but that means weather systems tend to stall out. They can't move quickly to the north or down to the south. And here's some of that cool to cold air, which makes rain in the springtime and summertime season, by the way. So systems come into the Pacific Northwest. We get some dry time through parts of the central plains, drying out Texas, the Gulf Coast. That could be good news back in the desert Southwest. But look at the moisture over many areas of the Corn Belt and points on to the east.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
I have seen some remarkable collections of antique farm tractors at those Meekum Gone Farm and auctions. I'm not sure, though, that I have ever seen one quite like this. It's from California, and it's very green. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store-Lock Quality Tool Cabinets. You'll love filling it up. You'll love working on that cabinet. You'll love just sitting there looking at it. What a tremendous addition it will be to your shop. See what they have to offer at storelock.com. Call them at 1-800-STORLOC and tell them Max sent you. Fred Williams has made a living in the onion business over the years, not just growing them in California, but packing them and shipping onions to the world, to New Zealand, Australia, China, from his facility there about 80 miles southeast of Los Angeles. Over the years, at the same time, he's been collecting John Deere tractors. Not just any antique John Deere tractors, some very unique ones, like Waterloo Boys, for example. These are hand-picked by Fred. If there was a leak, he fixed it. If it needed a battery, he put new batteries in almost all of them. And new tires on most all of these tractors, too. They'll be selling at the Beacom Gone Farmin' Spring Classic. It starts Thursday. That auction does at Davenport, Iowa. We look forward to being there Thursday through Saturday. There'll be a special 2-hour broadcast, by the way, on RFD TV next Saturday. Well, it's Mark Stock's time to join us here, and of course he sells the late model tractors, those that have been gently used, very gently in many instances. Let's find out what's moving across the block next week.
Max, March the 24th on BigIron.com, 142 sellers will be selling equipment. The Danny D. Domeyer and Kathleen L. Domeyer Living Trust Estate in Geneva, Nebraska features a bunch of Case IH equipment. Check out their 305 Magnum, their 380 Magnum. They've also got a 7230 Combine selling, Case IH 125 Maxim mechanical front tractor with a loader. We got a Case IH 3330 self-propelled sprayer and an Oliver 550 two-wheel drive tractor. Lee Paris is from Frankfort, Indiana. They've got a Case IH 2188 Combine. Nicholas Herring from Mount Olive, North Carolina. They'll be selling a 2016 John Deere 5085 mechanical front tractor with a loader, only 413 hours. We also have a 2019 John Deere E15 hydraulic flex-wing rotary cutter. Randy Bradford and Jason Bradford from Bragg City, Missouri. Folks, they've got a big sale, including a 2017 John Deere S680 tracked four-wheel drive combine, only 813 separator hours. They've got a John Deere 8330 mechanical front tractor and a 2006 Freightliner Columbia semi-truck tractor. Agco Finance out of Jonesboro, Arkansas will be selling a 2017 Road Gator dry fertilizer spreader. Folks, all these items will be selling here on March the 24th. Go to BigIron.com for more information.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide. We stand for you.
This Week in Agribusiness is proud to continue our salute to the FFA, and we're still getting to know the state officer team from Iowa. FFA. Joining us this week is Carson Brinks. And Carson, how long have you been a member of FFA?
Yeah, so I've been in FFA for 5 years now. I started out my freshman year and I'm still going strong.
What was it that intrigued you? What got you excited to join FFA 5 years ago?
Yeah, so all of my older siblings, all 4 of them, have served as FFA officers before I was even in the organization. And then on top of that, my dad was also a chapter officer back when he was in the organization too.
So leadership runs deep in the Brinks family. Carson,
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about what you do in your role as state vice president.
So as the Northeast State Vice President, I also serve as the president of the Northeast District itself with an entirely separate officer team. So as that officer team, we kind of coordinate all the events that take place in the Northeast District for our FFA members. We have close to 32 school districts. That is kind of our area that we're in charge of running district convention, Green Hand Fire Up, and a variety of different events throughout the year to keep members involved and engaged.
That is impressive, and that's a very diverse agricultural area in Northeast Iowa.
Yeah, it definitely is. We have a lot of variety.
Carson, as you continue your service and you look out to the future, what does the future hold for you when you get out of school?
Yeah, so when I get out of college, I'd like to return back to the family farm. Agriculture has always been a huge passion of mine, and there's nowhere else in the world that I would rather be than on my family's farm. With that, I would like to also continue to keep my passion for agriculture there by supporting the FFA and my local community.
Fantastic. Carson Brinks, Northeast State Vice President for Iowa FFA. Thank you for your service.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
Well, I hope you celebrated last week. Yes, St. Patrick's Day, of course, but I also hope you celebrate National Agriculture Day. That day set aside to salute the farmers, the ranchers, the food producers, and everybody in the food chain for what they provide for us on a daily basis, not only in this country, but around the world. And I got to thinking to the history of National Agriculture Day, and it brought back some memories, because I don't think we would have a national day to salute agriculture were it not for Kika de la Garza. Kika was a member of Congress representing the 15th District of Texas, and he served in Congress from 1965 to 1997. He was seated on the Agriculture Committee, where he served for the rest of his career on Capitol Hill. And in 1981, Kika de la Garza was voted chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, where he served for 14 years, the second longest in that panel's history. I worked with Kika de la Garza as a reporter many times to talk agricultural policy. He knew that I grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, and from that point on, he would never say, "Hello, Orion." He would say, "Orion, have you had your glass of milk today?" And that became our standard greeting for as long as we worked together on news conferences of that type. Kika de la Garza, who felt strongly about the need to recognize agriculture on a day set aside each year. So thanks to him for the work he did. Those are my thoughts on Samuelson Says.
Coming up, we'll take another trip to the Farm Progress virtual experience. This week, we're looking at the Kilbro 1135 corner auger grain cart. As yields on the farm continue to rise, it's imperative that we know how to get that grain from the combine to the truck and get it into town. We use a grain cart for that tool, and the Farm Progress virtual experience featured several. Here's one right now.
The Kilbro 1135 corner auger grain cart. The Kilbro 35 series of side-fold corner auger grain carts feature enhanced unloading speeds and greater reach. With an economical design to meet your demanding harvest needs. The side-fold single auger design allows the upper auger to be longer, increasing the side reach and the height, allowing the operator to drop grain straight down for greater control. The standard two-way rubber downspout provides side-to-side control for easily topping off trucks. The 35 series lineup of grain carts features tank capacities ranging from 750 to 1,100 bushels. And unloading speeds up to 500 bushels per minute depending on the model. The unique auger sump and steep side slopes ensure a quick and complete clean out of grain during each unload. If you're looking for an economical, valuable, and time-saving addition to your operation, look to the 35 series of Kilbro quarter auger grain carts.
To see that video and more, visit farmprogressshow.com. That should help tide you over until the Farm Progress Show is back in person this year, August 31st through September 2nd in Decatur, Illinois. Thanks to all of you for taking the time to tune in this week. We here at This Week in Agribusiness are always excited to see you, and we'll be back next week with more news and information that relates to agriculture. Stay safe, everyone.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.